as separate entities.
Right.
So does that
This is
mean
Barbara.
Go ahead.
so does that mean that each and every interaction I have is an interaction with Elohim?
No, Barbara. You can't interact with who you are. You are who you are.
Even when I'm interacting with another person?
You're still interacting with yourself.
Oh, that's right, because it's one in. Okay, all right.
Barbara
Okay.
Jean, go ahead.
You said what I was going to say, that when you think about the way the Spirit, the Great One responded to Moses, I am that I am. Um, I am is a state of being. It's just being, and you don't put descriptors around it. You are what you need to be, when you need to be, to whomever you need to be, as you need to be. And again, that's one experience. That's an experience.
Mm.
That's not a thing that you can define.
I was reading a book that I received from George, and it goes in detail about who we are without really saying it the way we were talking about it. When it speaks about spirituality before that was religion, that was spirituality before that was Christianity, Islam, or any other religion on the face of the earth. And that's simply saying people were experiencing who they are. They are experiencing who they are. Without having to label it or label that they are a member of this particular group or that particular group. So I think it behooves us to, would behoove us to look at that if we really want to get an understanding of it. However, I will tell you that this is one of those books that you may start out reading with a little bit of ease, but it quickly morphs into something that you, at least for me anyway, I cannot read it if there's any noise around me, period.
Mm.
And still, at times, I have to go reread what I have just read. But it will give you insight into what we're trying to say this morning. Any other questions?
Yeah, Pastor Richard, good morning. This is George from Philly. As you mentioned earlier, I mean, we can't define Elohim. It is an experience, but I thought, what was helpful for me, was to read Psalms 82 and also John, the Gospel of John 10. And that just helped me to better understand some of the, not just the experiences, but the actions in terms of things that, I can be conscious about in terms of who I am as Elohim. So I just thought that was helpful to me anyway. I just, not to define it, but just to read it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I want to address a couple of things. Why is it that we are experiencing things with such rapidity? Could it possibly be that enough individuals have bought into the belief that they are not individuals, even though they may do or commit individual acts by thought projection? Or is it that we the Creator is to believe that we have reached critical mass, and I use that phrase loosely. We have reached critical mass with those who believe who they are. And having reached that point, we are bringing things into a reality that we never saw coming. And by doing so, we are fulfilling the scriptures. I believe that the whole concept of prophetic utterances has a bearing on what scriptures will be fulfilled, because the fulfillment of the scriptures cannot take place if there is no receptor in this earth realm to receive and project those prophecies. Even though the projection of the prophecies may very well not be understood by the one projecting them, they still must be projected and cannot be projected without having been embraced by the one who is projecting them, knowingly or unknowingly. I believe that we are at that place now where we are reaching the edge of things. The edge meaning that we're about to cross a line where things will begin to settle out in terms of the opening of humanity's eyes and the embracing of the Creator by everyone. And I'm not talking about embracing God as much as I'm talking about embracing Ein Sof, the light of all light. And in doing so, one embraces who it is, meaning we are Elohim. So when we embrace Elohim, we also embrace Ein Sof, because without Ein Sof there is no Elohim. And so, this idea about Ein Sof is that Elohim and everything that is, including the universe, is but one ray of Ein Sof. So, right now, because there is such a deep desire on behalf of humanity to embrace this being that we are, and without even knowing what that means in its entirety, we are bringing things to a head, or bringing things into fruition, even the things we are fearful of and complain about or get angry about. We get upset about racism and things that happen, like with George Floyd and so many others, but yet we are the ones who desired for racism to be brought to the surface so it can properly be dispensed with. And this is where we are now, inclusive of desiring that the entity called church be more scrutinized than what it has been, and with our desires for people to see the road that they have been guided upon that leads to a religious place without any expectation of change and without any knowledge of the inherent power that every entity has been endowed with. Any questions about that? Comments? I suppose that resonates.
Yes.
So, being everything that we are experiencing with our eyes, eyes, are a reflection of what we have been blinded to in the past. All of the things that we see are not things that are new. They are things that we simply have not seen. And yet they have been right before our eyes. We haven't seen it. And there are some of us who still see vaguely, because I hear people constantly talking about how George Floyd changed things, and how if it were not for what happened to him, or if it were not for him, we would not be where we are currently. Well, I disagree with that wholeheartedly, and the reason I do is because what I see is, if it were not for the 17-year-old girl who did the recording, we would not be where we are now. Because the things that happened to George Floyd has happened in the past, and that's probably still happening as we are talking right now. So it was not so much of that as much as it was the taping of the filming of the recording of what was going on at a time when everyone was at home. And I don't mean literally everyone, but the majority of people were at home and were able to be touched by it, as opposed to being so selfish until everyone was working or shopping or doing things to enhance themselves as individuals or as a family. But right now, it is totally different because of the viewership. Do you agree with that? Call Club. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Is there anything you see in that? Okay. Any questions about anything this week before I move forward? Or someone move forward?
Lester Holt keeps saying something about there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And behind the death of Floyd, and because it was recorded, was all of this spiritual stuff that had to be, that had to be birthed. And so that is what it was something that had to be experienced by more than a couple of people, but by a whole a mass of people, and it was not so much as the death itself, as it was the understanding that if this can happen to that person, it can happen to me, or if it can happen to that person, it can happen to my son or my child, and that there really isn't that much difference between us when we look at it that way.
Yeah, I agree. However, I think that it was the taping of it that got white people involved. To the extent that they were involved, because really things never changed with the African in the streets alone. It changed with white people in the street. And as we've said for years, the only ones who can change racism are white people. They are the only ones. And our viewing it has always been the same. That's why we give our kids to talk, because we realize if it happens to any to be concerned about their kids being out late at night or being pulled over by a policeman, do you? And then by you, I mean anyone on this line. 'Cause I don't know anyone who've had to do that. So, well, I wanted to continue by looking at the depth of the pain that's endured, realizing that the same place where there is pain, there is healing, and understanding that being what? Being cut with red hot knife, the place where that pain is experienced is the same space where the healing began. It's kind of hard probably to wrap your mind around, but the moment you cut, the body begins to heal itself, or at least try to. And I think that's where we are now. We have finally gotten to the place where the body is beginning to heal itself, and in the beginning of the healing by the body is the inclusion by choice of a huge number of white people being involved in what's taking place. This virus has changed the course of history in more ways than one. This virus has changed the course of history in that even though there have been more people than we can count engaged in these protests, I have not read, maybe some of you have, where they have been able to trace large numbers of infections back to the protesters. However, I have read where they have been able to trace a large number of infections to those who gathered at the beach or in bars or in other places where there is close contact, yet not with the demonstrators. Has anyone read anything or seen anything or to the contrary of that?
I have it.
Yeah.
This is Janice. I was just saying that I have not seen that any evidence of the protesters getting sick.
So that in itself speaks to the spirituality of it. Because there were, the spike in South Carolina, I know, came from the beaches, remember? The spike in the other places, that's where it's coming from. That's one thing. The other part of it is when the whole concept of what goes around comes around has played out, when in the other places the spike was very difficult to get under control, all of those were quote-unquote blue states, and that is when the determination was made by Mr. McConnell that they were not going to give out any more money. But now they're trying to figure out how to get out of it, because the spike in the red states is far worse than what they were in the blue states. What goes around comes around. And right now, there is such confusion in South Carolina who is a young African male who's running neck and neck in the polls with a man who never really campaigned the last time and won by 15 points. And now having the fight of his life coming from an African male when that last term, when they ran, an African could not even consider being engaged in an election like this. So again, the virus has changed everything. At a time when they were considering and still are considering the death of the Obamacare or the ACA, now they don't have a choice except to leave it in place or to modify it to be more effective. When I look at the idea that there are in Britain house flies that can literally eat a horse, or that is extremely painful because they shear flesh when they bite you through your clothes. And I look at the locusts in Africa, and I look at the malignant leadership in the American society, and the malignancy of it is reflected in the depth and danger of the virus. And Britain thought they were out of danger in terms of the virus, and yet what rears its head? A horseflies. And I look at also how the law enforcement are standing staunchly behind those who have murdered Africans and brown people in this country. And those policemen who have reported it have been terminated for reporting corruption within the law enforcement, reporting rape, reporting brutality. They've been terminated, but the union does not come to their rescue. All of these things and many, many more than I can enumerate are being experienced. And there is no doubt that anyone who cannot see the hand of the Creator involved in this, and by hand I mean the authority of the Creator involved in this, have really stuck their heads in the sand and refuse to see what's right in front of them. Not to mention the mutation that has taken place with this gene. I was told that this lady in Gatlin transitioned from corona, and her symptoms prior to her transition was brain hemorrhage and hemorrhaging from her vagina, even though she was far past the age of her cycle. And apparently they are trying to figure out what kind of adverse effect it had. I mean, what type of adverse effect this was that resulted in that type of hemorrhaging, because they had never seen it before related to this virus. So it's like this invisible authority is everywhere, and it's only wreaking havoc on those that it chooses to, based upon the energy and thought patterns that they are projecting. It appears as though protesting for the benefit of righteousness are being exempt, and those who are protesting for selfish desires are being adversely affected. I'm waiting to see how deeply the infection is and the death for those who had chairs zip tied together in South Dakota on stolen land yesterday. There is no doubt in my mind it's going to be hell to pay from the world of ancestors to those who desecrated that space on yesterday. And I do not think it's going to be 14 days in the making. I doubt very seriously if it will be 48 hours in the making, for that matter. So,
Pastor, can you elaborate on what you're speaking about?
yeah,
The desecration of what?
the land, it was a sacred, the mountain where the images of Washington, Lincoln, and whoever was on that mountain in South Dakota.
The Black Hills.
Uh,
The Black Hills.
yeah. That mountain was sacred to the Dakotas before the influx of Caucasians. And when they found, it was left intact under the possession of the Lakotas in the form of a treaty. And when gold was found on the property, of course, greedy Caucasians, as always, overran the land searching for gold. A lawsuit was filed in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the land had been stolen and had to be returned to the Lakotas. And the Lakota nation did not want them to come, them meaning Trump and his band of thieves, to come to their land for that 4th of July celebration. Yet they came anyway. So I am saying because of that, there's no doubt that there's going to be ancestral retribution for what they did. And I don't doubt that at all. I believe that even though I felt they should have searched for an injunction against the event, I believe they didn't. Maybe because, not maybe, they did it because the event was to take place, which opens a door for the ancestors to show themselves to be protectors of that piece of land. Is that it, Janice?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Anyone else?
I think this is Barbara. I think it's already started, as you said, because some of them brought the virus themselves and treated it. Don Jr.'s girlfriend
Yeah.
has tested positive, and they were there several days before. So, yeah, it's just a matter of time now.
Yes. And if his girlfriend tested, so what do you think he gonna do? So, I see all of these things not as a rewriting the scripture, but a writing the scripture. No different than the scripture that spoke to the pestilence in the land, Pharaoh refusing to allow the Hebrews to leave. Those types of pestilence are in the land, and it's going to continue to grow until there is a break, because the African is not the only enslaved mind. If you are seeing what's going on and you refuse to see it for what it is, then your mind is enslaved as well, regardless of whether you are African or Caucasian or otherwise. So I just believe that this is a battle for the ancestors to wage. And if the ancestors are waging this battle, so are we. And the we who, of whom I speak, are the souls that live in these houses called bodies. We're engaged in that warfare as well, at a level that we have never known beforehand. So I'm just saddened yet elated that these things are taking place at the same time. In addition to that, the weakness or the non-existence of power within religious settings are being exposed like they have never been exposed before. And the only one who can expose it is the Creator. And that is by opening doors of opening doors of visibility to those weaknesses by closing the doors of those buildings and by having a heat wave that makes it improbable to do a park and praise in church parking lots. The closing of these doors is giving those who were in those pews opportunity to see. The only thing that is required in the gathering of ourselves is to be taught about who we are as opposed to being entertained. And the greatest entertainer being the most popular preacher that attracts the largest number of people, and now are at the brink of destruction because the same people can't gather. I received a text message from this company that sells Christian supplies, or church supplies, I should say. They have a box, a non-touch collection method. The non-touch collection method is this square box that's on a pole with four wheels, a platform and four wheels at the bottom. And you roll the pole around this little box around the parking lot, and people drop their tithes and offering in it. And the little box costs $297. However, you can get a smaller one for $209.
Oh my God. But you still gotta touch the money.
Yeah. Oh God.
This is being offered,
That's crazy.
yet no one is speaking of a better method to reach the people in terms of teaching them. But they do have a method for you to get your money. All these things are being exposed.
Crazy.
And no one is asking, why is it that these things are taking place? What I'm hearing are things like the devil going to run his course, and God going to bring this to the end and expose who the devil really is. Well, it's my contention that God is already doing that. The adversary are those voices that are incapable of speaking to the sheep without regard to distance or the idea of being scattered. I was speaking last week about the idea of scattered sheep. It's funny to me that you would do all these things, you institute all these methods in a bid to keep the sheep from scattering, because if the sheep scatter, you can't fleece them. You don't have access to fleece them. However, if you understand that the scriptures are spiritual in totality, then you begin to see that the fleecing of the sheep is, if you feel like you cannot cover your sheep because you don't see them, you end up fleecing them when you find them individually or collectively. However, if you understand that the sheep are not scattered, regardless of whether or not they're together physically, then everything is different in that there is no fleecing that takes place. There is no manipulation that takes place. It's speaking in reference to the signs of the times that keep them together. I don't get it why it's so difficult to see that, other than maybe the mind of the leadership has been claimed by those who perpetuate the concept of congregational religion or in a physical manner. We are experiencing an authority, as I've said so many times, that the earth has never seen before. The authority that we are experiencing exceeds any ecclesiastical authority that we thought was in existence. The authority that we are experiencing is the authority that is inherent to every individual and all of us collectively. It's inherent to us, yet we don't see it that way because we have allowed our thought processes to be governed by religious concepts that are non-existent and was never to be from the beginning. The mirror that we are being forced to look in, we're going to see either the leadership that is devoid of principles, morality, and devoid of anything that remotely resembles the authority that our Creator endowed us with, but only have the authority that's been endowed by religion. And the authority that's been endowed by religion is either in the hands of a vote with the pews or in the hands of ecclesiastical leadership who make decisions based upon their whims and selfishness, as opposed to making decisions based upon the spirituality of the scriptures, totally devoid of religious concepts, because religious concepts simply are manipulative concepts. So what do we look for going forward? What is there to be gained or observed going forward? Going forward, we are going to experience a influx of questions, trying to figure out not only when this will end, but how do we get through it, and why are certain things happening. Our response to that, or those inquiries, will determine not only the continued trajectory of the energy that's taking place now, or that we're experiencing now, but it will also determine when everything will come to an end. I was talking with someone last week, and I said to them, I have a feeling that we are going to have to come together and bring an end to this pandemic. However, I don't understand why I'm not seeing when we are to do this, but I know we are to do it. And the response to that was, I know why. And I'm like, okay, I'm waiting with bated breath. Let me know too. Well, it was simple. I was told that the reason it's not time is because it's hot. And we were told that when it gets hot, it would just disappear because the heat will kill it. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It dawned on me, but when they told me that we are in the throes of excessive heat, and it still is, the infection rate is still climbing. And if this thing had ended, or if we were to do that and it ends, then the abhorrent leadership of this nation, the leadership that is devoid of intellect without the ability to even spell the word or explain what it means, the leadership who has less command of the English language and life itself than someone who is 2 months old would be able to claim victory over the sciences in that I told you it was going to end. So
Yes.
the Creator,
Yes.
Oh, okay. So the Creator has a sense of humor.
He does.
I'm going to show you that no matter how high it gets, it ain't over till it's over.
Yeah.
So I say that for more than one reason. One, to say to us that it's going to be incumbent upon us to make that move at some point. And two, to those who are listening and find it difficult to believe or to wrap your mind around, wait and see. Up to this point, nothing has changed in this society that we have not discussed or desired to change. And it is my belief that this too will not end until we have been brought together to bring it to an end. Why? Because I think it was 2 weeks ago, Barbie brought up the idea or reminded us that we were in a meeting talking about the flag being taken down permanently in South Carolina when the young lady climbed the pole and brought
Right.
it down. Right?
Right.
Well, the reason it had to be the first one to come down in the manner that it did is the manner in which it came into play in the beginning. It started with Strom Thurmond in South Carolina, and here it is. It ended in South Carolina. So we are, and let me say this before I move on. And Strom Thurmond was one of the most complex creatures in public life, in that he appeared to be in his speaking, uninformed, unintelligent, all the other stuff that go with the uns. But he was much smarter than people gave him credit for. And his public racism was hiding his behind the scenes engagement with Africans in South Carolina in particular. In that if it were not for him, Morris College, Benedict College, South Carolina State would not exist. But he didn't do any of it publicly. And speaking of, Benedict is a private school, but yet privately he did those things to keep it alive. And it wasn't because of separate but equal as much as it was. It didn't matter for some reason. He had an affinity for those things. And I say that he was a very complex individual. I speak from experience. Phoebe would tell you that he called me every day for 2 months to come to work with him and Lee Atwater. Of course, I refused. But the complexity of him is in that I was supposed to be his liaison with the Clark community, and Lee Atwater was his redneck connection. I don't understand the complexity of how his mind worked, but I do know that nothing in me would allow me to engage with him in that manner. Now, I wonder if that was the complexity of quite a few people in this nation until the real attitude was brought to the surface in the embodiment of the principles of racism, the embodiment of those principles in someone who have no principles whatsoever. So I think that we are no longer at a crossroads. We are in a place where our Creator is not bringing balance, but it has already been brought. It's just a matter of manifestation of it. And no other place on earth could balance be brought to the earth than in this place, where everything was thrown out of balance because of greed and due to an insatiable appetite for murder and rape and all of those other things that are reprehensible yet were normal for those who infiltrated this nation and raped the African continent of its souls and brought them to this nation. Any questions or comments?
I have a question. about the ancestors a little bit. Could you elaborate on that? How the ancestors will help us do this, whatever we need to do?
Okay, well, I believe that the ancestors has always made every attempt to assist us in what we do, but we